Welcome back. AJ, how's it going, man? Thanks for doing this again.
Likewise, Steve. Apologize my alarm right there. Glad to be doing this with you again. Ready to talk about UFC 251, first fight on Fight Island. And, man, it's an exciting time for us fight fans. We haven't seen anything like this, and I'm ready to get to it.
Yeah, let's get right into it. What do you think the overall theme of Fight Island is going to be? From what I understand, it is the bigger cage. It isn't the smaller cage like the Apex, right? It is a bigger cage.
That's what I've been hearing, yes.
Okay. Anything else in terms of, is it enclosed? What do you think about the heat factor? Have you heard anything?
I haven't heard too much. I'm kind of like approaching it like how we did with UFC 242 when they were in Abu Dhabi, because it kind of, there's no other like locations where the UFC's gone recently that I could compare it to. And that sort of thing, like, they got tired and like a little bit sweaty, yeah. And maybe some fighters that had cardio issues in the past, maybe it affects them a little bit more here. Right. But it's kind of just business as usual for me. I mean, it's not like an altitude thing, so I'm not really factoring it in too much.
Well, if you're saying that about somebody gassing in the past, then that feeds into one of my underdog bets for the night. And Dr. Beans actually let us know that yes, it is enclosed. So Beans, I appreciate it. If you want to jump on the podcast, Beans, let me know. Send me your email, and I'll send you a link right now if you want to jump in. But AJ, let's get right to this first fight, and the first fight is Martin Day and Davey Grant, and I will let you do the honors because I have a bet on the second fight, so I'm going to let you do the honors for this first fight. So what do you think here, Martin Day and Davey Grant?
Yeah, I did like a little joke tweet about this in the Salikhov Santos fight where like we could see a lot of spinning kicks here. Like both guys love to throw their spinning kicks. And yeah, it's going to be a fan-friendly fight, I think. They're both aggressive. They have that like karate style. Day is like the younger, fresher guy. Both guys, the thing that stuck out to me with researching is they just fight so darn infrequently. Davey Grant, we rarely see him in there. I mean, we saw him in there in November 2018 when he beat Grigory Popov or Popov. Popov. Yeah, he went in there. He landed some takedowns. Grant's like a hard guy to, like I guess deal with because he's got like that, like kind of like he'll always be in your face, like utilizing all those like spinning kicks and whatnot. And Day, kind of the same thing, but not so much with the grappling. I do think that we could see Grant. I think his path of least resistance here would be to land takedowns. I don't think Grant is like an elite wrestler by any means, but I have seen Green's grappling look shaky at times. His takedown defense looks shaky. I think he's getting better there. The guy's still young, so he's probably improved since the last time we've seen him there in, what was it, against it was like a couple years ago or so. But that said, I still got to go off with my eyes tell me, and I still do think that Grant's probably the better grappler, could get some work done there. But I actually am going to edge Day here. I think the big thing here is the athleticism, I think, is in his favor, and also the cardio, too. I noticed that Grant got pretty tired there in that Grigory fight. Yeah, so I think that Day rather is going to do enough on the feet to win rounds here, be the more busier striker, be a bit more technical, and just kind of win on the judges' scorecards. But a fight that I think should be pretty fun.
AJ, I'm going to ask you some questions because you basically said everything that I would have said. I personally think that Day is the better striker. He has a hell of a strikes per minute average also based on that fight against Pingwan Lee. I forget how to say his name. What do you make of that fight? Did you think that Lee won that fight?
Yeah, I do think that it could have gone either way. It was one of those, you look at the stats, to your point, he landed 100 significant strikes today, and Lou landed like 50 something. And I think they each landed a takedown and they each landed a knockdown. I thought round 3 clearly went to Lou. Round 1 clearly went to Day. And I thought round 2 probably should have went Day's way as well, but it was close.
Round 2 is when Day knocked him down too. Right? Round 3, I believe it was round 3 is when Lou knocked Day down and then jumped on top and got some ground and pound in and some rolling around on the ground. I'm pretty sure Day knocked knocked Lou down at the end of round 2, towards the end of round 2. We would have to check that again. But I thought Day won rounds 1 and 2. That's why I was asking you. That's exactly why I asked.
Yeah, pretty questionable there. Day could get another chance here to get his hand raised.
So we were criticized. Well, I was criticized. I shouldn't say we. I was criticized for not being able to show the odds in a way that everybody could see them. So I'm trying to zoom in. So hopefully this is good enough. AJ, I don't know if it's good enough for you, but it's definitely better. Day at -170. Do you like a bet on Day? I mean, I agree with you. I think that Day is the better striker. I think his proficiency in terms of strikes per minute, it would serve him very well if this stays on the feet for 3 rounds. I would have to think he's going to win 2 out of those 3 rounds. But again, Grant, although he's not a great takedown guy, I think he had some success against Popov, and that's kind of why he went down there. But in his previous fights, he has been submitted twice on the ground. And again, I don't think Martin Day is much of a BJJ practitioner, but Grant, if he gets him down, he can win rounds. So is it worth a bet one way or the other here?
I personally would prefer to plant my flag in terms of making a bet on concrete, a concrete conviction on my read. And this is a fight where there's just a lot of question marks on both guys, to be honest. Even though we both like Day to win, it's there's just a lot of question marks on the guy. We haven't seen him in so long. I mean, I'm hopeful that, maybe he's gotten better since the last time we've seen him. But the reality is we just don't know. We haven't seen this guy in so long, and he's still only fought one time in the UFC, and Grant, for all the other things that we said about him, he's been inactive too, and he's been submitted a few times. He's still got more UFC experience, and he has, proven that, even though it was a while ago, he has a win over Marlon Vera that aged nicely. So it's a trickier fight to handicap for those reasons. But, like I always say to the people that listen, you don't have to invest in every single fight on the card. That's the beauty of this. We got so many fights that we could invest in, plenty of opportunities to make money, and would just like to pass on everybody. You don't have to invest in every single fight if you don't like to, if you don't have a good read. Especially
on Fight Island, right? Between, a 15-day span, we have 4 cards.
Exactly. Yeah, it's 3 cards and 7 days, like we had a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna leave it at that because I don't have a bet on this first fight. So again, I guess I do agree with the betting line. I think Day's gonna win the fight if I had to pick one or the other. But I do have a bet on this second fight. So I really like Vanessa Melo here. I'm not saying I like her a lot, but she's gonna walk forward in this contest. She walked forward in her previous fights. Talk about a couple different things. Yes, she's gonna take shots, but she's gonna give shots. So she's going to walk forward. I think she carries more weight with her punches. Karol Rosa, I was not very impressed with her, and she gassed. So the person that I was talking about, I had written down, she gassed in that last fight. I think the girl's name was Procopio, I think it was her name. BJJ black belt. The fight never got to the ground. Now, again, if Rosa decides to bring Melo to the ground, Melo can't get up. Right, so if you look at her fight, her second UFC fight, she couldn't get off her back, but she did fight Aldana in Mexico City, and again, she lasted 15 minutes with Aldana. So if she does that, then with a full camp here, which I'm assuming is a full camp, she'll have no problem going the distance. She's gonna walk forward the entire time. So I think the only way that Rosa beats her is if she puts her down on the ground. Again, they're both BJJ brown belts, but if Rosa puts her down and puts her on her back, I'm telling you right now, I'm going to lose the bet. But at plus 190, I think Melo's going to walk forward. I think she has better power. I think she has better cardio, and I think she's going to walk right into Rosa's chest and make her strike. And Rosa, even in a slow striking fight like that fight was with Procopio, she gassed. She was gassed in round 3. And again, there's a theme going on here. And I'll let you in on what I noticed. Rosa trains with Andrade, right? So the last time Rosa fought was on an Andrade card. And we, as UFC people, we know the names. So we're like, oh, Rosa is her training partner. She's great, right? Well, let's look at some other training partners. Take Pavan Lewis, right? Pavan Lewis was John Jones' training partner. Hasn't had a very good run. You know what I mean? We all kind of hyped him up a little bit. We thought he was going to be real good. John Jones hypes him up. So we're like, oh, if John says it, then the guy's got to be good. And he struggled a little bit. Do you remember, I think it was when Anderson Silva went to, where did he fight over in Europe? But do you remember the guy that was like one of the opening fights and they're like, oh, this is his training partner? I can't think of his name. You know what? I should be better prepared.
No, you're good. I think I know who you're talking about. Were you talking about when he fought Adesanya?
When he fought Adesanya. One of the opening fights was his training partner?
Yeah, the gentleman, his name was Mariano. I think he fought Lando Venata. Is that what you're talking about?
There you go. And again, not very good, right? Not very. Lando, I think, took him down. He had no takedown defense, just put him on his back. There was nothing for him. And then, like, even you take a guy like Matt Sales, right? And Matt Sales, I think, is pretty good, but everybody hyped him up because he trains with Dominic Cruz. So I think it's kind of like a pattern here. These people get a lot more respect because of who they train with, but they don't have the same skills as the people that they train with. And again, if you look at Rosa's last fight, I understand that it didn't want to. I'm sure she didn't want to go to the ground because Procopio was a BJJ black belt. I'm sure I'm saying that name wrong. So she didn't want to go to the ground. But it was a very slow, striking fight between those two for the first 2 rounds. And then I think she wound up catching a kick and putting her down later in the fight. But Melo's going to walk right into her chest. That's just the way that Melo fights. Now, if Rosa's going to put her on her back, I totally agree. I'm going to lose, as I said earlier. I'm going to lose this bet. But Melo at plus 190, I took a shot at it and I hit it before. So, AJ, go ahead. Tell me why I'm wrong.
It's a matchup where, like, I just like to say in general, I do think that Rosa has some tools that are pretty compelling. I don't think she's like the next champion of this division, but I really like how she could fight at a crazy high pace. I'll get into why it's a good side of your argument in a minute here, but she landed like 171 significant strikes. I'm looking at UFCstats.com in her debut. That's over 11 per minute. That's just a crazy high pace. You mentioned she got tired there. She, if she were to just fight at like a lower / like moderate output pace, like I'd be like nervous for her, like if she got tired in that circumstance. But the fact that she showed that she could fight at a very high pace, even if she did slow down, it's still, encouraging me. It tells me that her cardio in general is pretty solid. On top of that, she's got some power in her hands. She hurt Prosopio there. But to your point in why, Melo's like live, because the thing with Rosa, and it's glaring, is her striking defense is a liability. I mean, she threw all those significant strikes and landed, but she also absorbed a lot. Prosopio landed her fair share too, like over 160. So if these two women are just standing in the middle of the octagon and trading, similar to Rosa's fight against Prosopio, Melo is live. I mean, that fight with Prosopio and Melo's debut, it was a split decision. I mean, and I'm somebody that had a bet on Rosa in that spot. And, it was one of those, like, I thought she clearly won, but you know how we could get sometimes we kind of like have a little bit of a bias when we're watching live. But after watching it, I thought Prosopio made a good account of herself. And like you said, Melo does like to walk her opposition down. She's very tough, durable. And the Aldana fight, that actually impressed me because, Aldana is obviously a great fighter. You touched on that. But like the fact, I had to go back and check this. She took that fight on short notice. And that fight was at Mexico City altitude, which we know that's even higher than Denver. So you got to have some extra oxygen, to get going for 3 rounds. And, she hung in there with a high caliber woman in Irene Aldana, who's fighting Holly Holm here. So I do think that the fight can be competitive. And to your point, I do think that Rosa will have a more clear advantage if she takes her down. I actually do think that Rosa's a good athlete. She, like you said, she didn't take the fight to the ground against Prosopio because Prosopio is the BJJ black belt. But here, I could see her using her wrestling. Maybe she takes her down. Maybe she controls her for a bit. But while these two women are standing, I have to think that with the style that Rosa brings, that the volume could be relatively competitive, and we can see one of those split decision type of fights if Melo matches that output to Rosa and does not get taken down enough to make it enough to steal rounds for Rosa.
So I'll tell you what. You brought out the numbers, and I think sometimes the numbers can be misleading because I watched both of those fights. There's no way that I would have thought that Rosa threw 170-something strikes. especially in the first and second round. There's no way. So, sometimes we criticize Fight Metric also, where in these female fights, every strike is a significant strike. So I would have to watch that again and just kind of go back and say, all right, is she really 11 strikes a minute? That's a lot of strikes. You know what I mean? Not landing, though. You're talking about throwing, right?
It says she landed 171. I could see how much she threw here. She threw 351. That's pretty crazy.
Did you watch the fight?
I did.
I watched it today. That's not right. I'm just telling you that there's no way I agree with that.
Yeah. Well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe the number is perhaps inflated, but like it kind of reflects the type of woman she is. She'll go in there, stand in the middle of the octagon, and she's willing to trade with you. Like she'll just go in there and fight at a high pace. And can Melo keep up with it? Sure. Yeah, she did that thing. She competed with Aldana at Mexico City, so it's possible. I think this is a sneaky fight. Like I think it could be fun. I think Rosa's fight with Prosopia won fight of the night in her debut.
So I love the bet. I put it in. I didn't think I was going to be betting that fight, but when I saw it, I was like, I think she's going to walk forward. I think she's going to outstrike her. And I also noticed that if you do watch the fight or anybody else watches the fight back, Rosa wore it on her face. She was bloodied up. She was bloodied up first. And I think if Melo walks forward and bloodies her up, the judges are going to say, yeah, she's landing more. She's doing more damage. So that's where my bet is at. And AJ, I'm going to take another one because I bet this fight too. So I'm not going to lie. I got back-to-back bets here, and then I'll throw plenty to you. Trust me. You know how I am. I have no problem with that. But I'm going to screw up with this name. Zhalgas, Zhumagulov, and Raulian Paiva. So Paiva, I think it's Paiva. I actually like him a lot. I actually played him a ton on DraftKings when he fought against Kara France, and I thought that he could have won that fight. I thought that was a very, very closely contested fight. But I'm watching these two guys on tape, and I watched Zhalgas a few years ago fight Tyson Nam. That was the first fight that I went to, and I was like, all right. Earlier in the fight, he was very kind of cautionary with his striking, and he picked his spots. And I don't know if it was Nam was just looking for a knockout, so he didn't really just try to win rounds. He was looking to just finish the fight. But it was a 5-round fight. Zhalgas had no problem going the rounds. I don't think Paiva is going to have a problem with it either. But he's looking to win rounds. Like that's the way that Zhalgas fights. And I think that this is a great matchup for him. He has a win versus Tyson Nam in a 5-round fight. He went on to win the Fights Night Global belt at this weight class at 125. He throws he's a little awkward. He throws a lead left hook, which I notice he does it often, mixes his punches and kicks real well. I like him a lot. I like him a lot in this spot. And again, getting him at plus money, I got him at plus 165. I think getting a guy who's coming in, basically has his whole country behind him. If you like narratives, I looked at Instagram. I think I sent it to you too. Like he was called into the mayor's house to have a conversation with the mayor and some dignitaries in what is it, Kazakhstan, I believe he's from. He's fighting with a purpose here, and he's very, very capable. He's fought some good fighters. He's fought in championship fights, and again, Paiva is young. He's made some mistakes against Kara France. I thought he was good enough to win against De La Rosa. I'm pretty sure he lost round 1 against De La Rosa, and he was actually behind in strikes until the knockout punch. I think the knockout punch was the punch that actually put him over, like 29-28 in strikes against Mark De La Rosa. And I'm not a big fan of De La Rosa striking at all. He's a BJJ black belt. I get that, but he's not a great striker by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm picking another dog here, and I bet it already. So Zhalgas plus 165 over Paiva. I think it's going to be a good fight. I think it's going to be a closely contested fight. And again, I think this is going to be the kind of fight where it's going to be 2-1 in rounds, and I hope I got the upper hand here. But what do you think here, AJ? All you, bro.
So yeah, I do think Zhalgas here is talented. He looks like a decent technical striker. Like you said, he's fought some guys that are in the UFC. He has been 5 rounds, and I believe he comes from M1, which is a regional promotion that is like really good. I think that the fighters that come out of there are solid. That make the UFC for sure. And yeah, he's live here. I don't think that. I think the fight should be won or lost on the feet. I think that Paiva is a good grappler. He's a BJJ brown belt, but I also think Zhalgas has shown some grappling chops as well. I saw Zhalgas get his back taken by Ali Bagatinov. I've seen him in some other interesting situations as well. It's just a scenario where I just think he's got some tough circumstances going against him. I'm not trying to say that he can't go out here and win and outstrike Paiva, but just in terms of looking at the experience in the UFC, the level of opposition, and just Paiva is just like a guy that's like a winner, like a guy like Cody Stamann. Like we see, he has so many wins and very few losses on his resume because he's just a guy that knows how to win rounds on a consistent basis. You mentioned the De La Rosa fight. Yeah, it was fairly competitive up until the knockout blow there. Paiva's a guy that I do think he's really solid. I rate him highly. He's a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I do think that his scrambling ability is solid. His wrestling, you would think with a long, like tall guy wouldn't be like elite. It's not elite, but I do tend to think that it's good enough to stuff the takedowns, especially in this matchup. And they don't have the reach advantage for this gentleman Zhalgas yet, which is pretty interesting. But I do think just based off the eye test that Paiva is the longer fighter. I actually think
he definitely is.
Yeah, and Zhalgas, I wish something that stuck out to me. I wish his output would be upped in striking exchanges. He doesn't always put his foot on the gas, which it could show its face here again and cost him the fighter. Could help by just being more conservative. But I tend to think that Paiva will just be a bit more busy than him, and I think he's a bit more technical. And so I just think that over the course of 3 rounds, that Zhalgas will need to hurt Paiva. It's possible that he outstrikes him like Kara France did, but I think more than likely Paiva gets his hand raised. I hope your bet cashes for you, but I just tend to think that Paiva should go out here and probably win a decision. Superior technical striker, higher output. I think the better counter fighter, better footwork as well. So he would be my pick to win. So
I'm going to give you one thing here. I totally agree that Paiva is the more dynamic striker. I just think that Zhalgas is the kind of striker that is looking to score and get out of harm's way. And I think that he did a great job against Tyson Nam of ducking the initial punch, putting a little bit of a combination on him, and then getting out of the way, using his kicks to keep distance, moving, getting in the pocket, start coming into the pocket with that lead left hook. I think he's going to steal rounds. I have a feeling, there's no doubt in my mind he's winning round 1. So now what does Paiva do when he comes out of his corner in round 2 and he knows he's down 1? Against De La Rosa, he knew that he couldn't really hurt him, so he went after him and he knocked him out. I'm not saying that can't happen again. All I'm saying is I think Zhalgas is going to fight a better, more strategic fight, and he's very good at ducking punches. Again, De La Rosa, not for nothing, he's a punching bag. His head doesn't move. So if you just are willing to take a punch, one of his punches, you're going to hit him square in the face. You know what I mean? It's going to happen. So listen, two in a row, bro. 2 bets in a row I have here. Let's get to this next fight. And AJ, I'm going to throw it to you. I actually did have a bet on Tybura. I'm betting every one of these fights, actually. I did have a bet on Tybura before his opponent was changed. But I know I sent that to you early. I'm assuming that you did some tape study there. So what do you think here? Marcin Tybura and Maxim Grishan.
Yeah, this new gentleman, Maxim, he's, I think from the eye test, like skill-wise, he's definitely solid. He comes from PFL. And, I know we had like Felipe Lins last week, which in like hindsight, and I understand it, people were saying on Twitter, like the motivation, like he wins $1 million. And it's like, I understand a big chunk of that comes out from the taxes and whatnot, but the guy still got a lot of money. So you could perhaps question the motivation.
Mike Perry narrative right there. Mike Perry narrative.
Exactly, like Perry narrative. And so, this gentleman, Maxim here, he has fought in PFL. He did defeat Jordan Johnson, which I think is a solid win. A gentleman that, fought in the UFC and then moved to PFL. the interesting thing there here is, in addition to the unfavorable circumstance of this being his UFC debut on short notice, he's a gentleman that, as I alluded to with Jordan Johnson, he's used to fighting at light heavyweight.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so and Tybura is like a big guy, like for heavyweight standards. So we could see here, like, while I do think Maxim here is faster than Tybura, I think he's probably the better striker as well. I think he's more technical. He's got some power in his hands. I noticed that he hurt Jordan Johnson, who's a guy that's durable. So, and then the thing that makes me nervous about Tybura in general is, he's always been a very durable heavyweight. He'd only been stopped one time, and it was a doctor stoppage prior to the Derek Lewis fight. But then we saw Lewis finish him, and then we saw Abdurrahimov finish him, and then we saw Sakai finish him. And so, like, it wasn't heading towards the right direction. And so with the Spivak fight, Spivak, he's more so known as a grappler. But with this gentleman, I think there is potential for him to finish Tybura if that durability is legitimately an issue, because Sakai hurt him with the first clean punch that landed. And while this gentleman, Maxim, here is used to fighting a light heavyweight, which would mean that, he's like a smaller guy, based off the footwork, the speed that he's shown, the power, I do think there's potential for him to hurt Tybura. Tybura, I think, will need to initiate grappling here. I noticed that Maxim, despite that the second fight with Jordan Johnson, he drew. I noticed he did get taken down. He did give up his back, albeit he got up reasonably well. But with Tybura being a big guy, not a great wrestler, but a solid wrestler, he's also a BJJ black belt. I think there's potential for Tybura to, just like kind of impose his physicality, use the clinch exchanges to his advantage, perhaps take him down, and kind of win that way, like how he beat Spivak. Not the sexiest way to win a fight, but again, a way that could get him like the path least resistance, get his hand raised. Otherwise, I think this gentleman Maxim here will be a threat to him in the striking exchanges. So if I was Tybura and I was in his camp, I would just say clinch, take him down when you can, stay far away in striking exchanges, and then just kind of impose that kind of grappling-based game. So it's an interesting fight, to be honest with you. I think it could go a couple different ways.
Well, AJ, this is why I don't throw fights to you first, because everything I was going to say is what you said. I tend to lean with the take that Tybura is going to be the biggest guy. Bigger guy, I should say, in this matchup. I think that he's going to be able to get him into the clinch, push him against the cage. Tybura is known for doing that anyway, slowing fights down. And then if he can get you down, he will take advantage of you on the ground, whether it be ground and pound, or like you mentioned, if he gives his back, which I did notice on tape, then maybe we have a submission here. But again, it's also a guy coming in on short notice, going up a weight class. What is he gonna weigh in at? If he pulls a John Vellante and comes in at 245, 250, I'm gonna be like, listen, this guy he's not making it past the first round. He's gonna be exhausted. You know what I mean? Tybura always gonna do in the first round is push him against the cage, tire him out. All right. We already said that there's gonna be gas issues. Some of these guys are gonna gas out. It's gonna be a little bit hotter. Who knows what his training was? I mean, we literally found out about this fight today. You know what I mean? So we're talking about it's the 2nd. The fight is on the 11th. This guy's just going to get his cardio up, get his training in. Obviously, I'm sure he was training, but I can't think that his cardio is going to be better than Tybura, especially he's never fought at this weight. So how much weight is he carrying? If you're telling me that he's going to come out here and he's going to weigh 220, Tybura is going to be 240. So Tybura, what is he going to do? He's going to push him against the cage. If you tell me this guy comes out and he weighs in at 240, 245, Tybura is going to push him against the cage to tire him out, and then in round 2 beat him. So I just don't really think Tybura, if he stands out and just strikes with him, Tybura is giving him himself an opportunity to lose the fight. So I agree with that take. I think he's got to tire this guy out, get into the clinch early, test his takedown defense, try to get him down. Worst case, you clinch him, you elbow him, you knee him, you get him you fight dirty for the first round, tire him out, and then it's a more even fight in round 2, even if he does want to strike. You know what I mean? So that's my take. Obviously, you stole it, you had it before I did, but that was my take. And the odds here, just so everybody knows, are not up yet. So the old odds are still there. But I did have a bet on Tybura. I thought it would be a nice fight for Tybura either way. So AJ, this next fight. Going back a sec here. We're going into Leonardo Santos and Roman Bogatov, and this is a fight that I do not have a bet on. And again, it's tough to have for me. Again, you speak for yourself. For me, it's tough to have a lean when Santos just fights so infrequently. When he does fight, for the most part, he looks very good. He's impressive and he's beat some big names. But the problem is, I don't know what we're going to get out of him at 40 years old. And again, he's from Brazil, but yet he hasn't. The last few fights, he's fought somewhere over in Europe and the Middle East. He hasn't fought in Brazil. So, AJ, I'll throw it to you. What do you think here? What is your take?
So, yeah, Santos, like you said, when we see him in there, he's such a treat to watch. I mean, this is a guy that has wins over Kevin Lee, Anthony Rocco Martin, albeit it was earlier on in their careers, but still good wins nonetheless. And last time out, we saw him knock out Stevie Ray. I mean, Stevie Ray is a guy that's not easy to put away. And he's got a very good counter right hand. He's got big power in it, no doubt about it. And that's the crazy thing about him is because he's a guy that's known for his jiu-jitsu. He's a fourth-degree black belt, which is crazy. And he's decorated. He's got some medals here. So the guy is a threat both on the ground and on the feet. And, there's a significant age gap between his opponent, Bogatov, a gentleman coming from Russia who I believe is also from M1. So, again, another promotion that I rate highly personally. An undefeated guy, and from what I could tell, a grappler, which is interesting. All of his fights, it took me a while to actually find footage of this gentleman striking for extended periods of time because, like all of his fights, he's such a good wrestler. He could just take guys to the ground, and when he gets guys to the ground, he wants to pass the guard and look for the sub, and that's a great game. But I don't think he's going to do that here against, again, a fourth-degree Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt in Santos. Even though this guy is a really good grappler, it kind of reminds me of Makhachev versus Ramos. We see Makhachev go out there and land all these takedowns, but is he really going to try and do that against Davey Ramos, an ADCC champion? And we saw he didn't really get in top position until he hurt Ramos there. So I tend to think that Bogatov is just going to want to strike with Santos, and I tend to think that Bogatov is the better wrestler, so he should be able to keep the fight standing. I do think that Santos' wrestling is definitely capable. But, the thing with Santos, and you said it with his age too, it's the pace at which he fights at. Yeah, he's threatening, but he strikes at such a low output. I know you said numbers aren't everything, and I agree. But it's, he landed 23 significant strikes against Adriano Martins, the fight that went 3 rounds. He won a split decision there, 36 against Efrain Escudero, 26 against Norman Poke. And that's reflected in his style in that his cardio could definitely be improved. I noticed that Santos has slowed down in fights. I've also seen him hurt. I think he was hurt by Efrain Escudero as well. So while he's like a good guy in general and he's such a treat to watch, it's not, I did notice some vulnerabilities on tape. So, but the thing though with this matchup is Roman, again, he's more so as like a grappler wrestler guy. So like on the feet, this gentleman doesn't have any wins by TKO KO. I think the only one that he got was because of a shoulder injury. So it's technically doesn't count. So on the feet, again, we know Santos is threatening. He's a solid technical striker. But again, that output, if he doesn't knock out Bogatov, I tend to think that Bogatov could just maybe outvolume him. I don't think Bogatov's like a volume machine, but like maybe he's just a little bit busier than Santos and gets the nod. So it's a tricky fight to call because, again, we've got two guys here that their strengths are on the ground, but we might not even see them see the fight take place on the ground. We might just see the two guys that want to grapple with you strike. So it's an interesting fight in that sense.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And again, it's the kind of fight where I don't know what Santos is going to come out. I mean, I would say this is a dog or pass. If you want to bet it at all, just because Santos is 40 years old, and for all the right reasons, Bogatov should be able to outstrike him in terms of volume, and I think that could be enough if Santos doesn't get him down in a way where he can throw a submission on him. I think Bogatov is smart enough to maybe get that takedown and then get himself back up to the feet and make him strike again. So you're scoring, but then you're staying out of harm's way. Maybe I don't know. I just don't trust Santos at minus 175. Again, I think whoever was the dog here, I would put money on. But I haven't bet this, but if I did, I think it would be Bogatov. In this next fight, I really do like Makwan Amirkhani over Danny Henry. Danny Henry's a taller fighter. He's 6 feet. Makwan's 5'10", but basically has like an inch, reach advantage. I think Makwan is very good. He's just got to stay focused on winning rounds. He has 2 losses to Arnold Allen and Shane Burgos. I think Henry's going to be at a speed disadvantage in this fight. I know he dropped Dawadu and was able to. What did he finish him? Guillotine. I think he slapped the guillotine on him after he dropped him early.
Like a modified guillotine choke. Yeah,
something like that. But it was like he was a big underdog in that fight. He caught him with a punch. Great win. But I just don't see him, being competitive in a lot of his other fights that he's lost. And I think Makwan is the kind of guy who's been in there. I mean, he took some shots for Shane Burgos. I think Burgos put him down in round 3, and he had his strikes. Not many people can do what what some of the people that have beaten Burgos, Calvin Kattar and Josh Emmett. Not many people can take that pounding and keep going forward. Obviously, he broke Makwan, but Burgos is upper echelon. You know what I mean? And the guys that are beat him are top 5 in the division. Danny Henry, that he's not there. You know what I mean? He's lost to guys, and he even he's got finished in the UFC by guys that aren't even in the UFC anymore, right? So again, I think Makwan's going to be the better fighter here. I think he has the advantage on the ground too. Even if they get into into rolling around on the ground and into submission grappling, something like that, I think he's going to be able to outvolume him. I think he's going to be able to hurt him. Danny Henry, I think he's a little bit too slow. He does try to be a little creative with his strikes, but I think Makwan has the advantage here. So I'm picking Makwan. No bet for me, but I'm picking him to win. AJ, what do you think here?
Yeah, I'm right with you. I mean, I just think Makwan's the better fighter all around. The issue that was brought up in the past with him was like how infrequently he fought, but now we're seeing him fight more frequently. He fought Burgos in November, then he fought Fishgold in June of last year, that is. So I like that he's fighting more and more frequently. Apologize for that. I wasn't expecting a package, but so what we have here is Makwan is just the better technical fighter. You mentioned it with Henry. Like, he goes out there and he is a gentleman who, like you said, has gotten beaten up in fights, like the Daniel Tamor fight. For as long as Tamor had cardio, he was able to beat him up, and it's because Henry's striking defense is a liability. He leaves his chin up. He doesn't utilize proper head movement, and he's got this wide stance where his footwork could be improved, and you could kick at his leg. And so, Makwan, he's not known as like a big one-punch KO guy, but I tend to think he's a better striker, even more technical, better footwork. But I think that's where he'll be most at risk from Henry, who is the more active striker. Makwan just doesn't throw many strikes on the feet. He just doesn't want to engage with you. And so I think that, like you said, Henry's got some power. He hurt Dawadu prior to the submission attempt, and we've seen Makwan hurt. I was nervous for him that Burgos fight because I saw him get rocked and dropped by Jason Knight twice, which is a concern because Knight, he had his run in the UFC, but he's not a guy, like we know, not a guy that's known for a one-punch knockout type power. And so
right.
The fact that he was able to hurt Makwan there made me nervous. But even though Burgos eventually got him, it made me more comfortable in his durability because Burgos gave him a lot of shots before ending it.
Yeah.
And so Makwan could win on the feet. He could the more clear path to victory, though, is on the ground. No doubt about it. Makwan, I think, is just a much more craftier submission grappler, probably the better wrestler as well. Haven't really seen Henry's takedown defense tested often, so I kind of have to defer back to the Ige fight where Ige rocked him and then he took his back and then submitted him. I know that's not the most predictable sequence there, but then you look at the Daniel Tamor fight where Tamor was able to control him on the ground. And, Henry wasn't really threatening with subs or anything off of his back. So I just tend to think that Makwan's the better grappler here and could submit Henry. We saw Makwan submit a BJJ black belt and Chris Fishgold. I think Makwan's a better scrambler here as well. So it's really just his fight to lose. Henry could win this fight, sure, but I think he's just got to catch Makwan with a big punch, or he's just kind of got to hope that Makwan tires out like he's shown to do sometimes. But the preface of that is Makwan's kind of doing work early on, kind of like Timur was, gasses out, and then Timur's got some left, or Henry's got some left, and then he puts them away. So there's paths to victory for Henry, yes. But again, I just tend to think that they're not very likely, and that Makwan should just roll here as he's the better technical fighter.
Yeah, and again, that path to victory may be Henry losing rounds early, but persevering and making it to the later rounds and hoping that Makwan gasses, which again is not a very predictable path, right? You haven't seen it before, so you would think that you're not going to see it again. But again, by the same token, I mean, Danny Henry literally looked scared to engage with Ige. You know what I mean? I don't know how else to say it. Like, he looked like everything that Ige threw at him was just hurting him. And that's just no way to get in there and try to win rounds and win fights. So I'm on Makwan. I haven't put a bet in. Maybe I'll parlay it with something else. I'm interested in your take, AJ, in this next fight. And again, just so everybody sees the odds here, we'll throw them up there. For Makwan, he's minus 190. I think he was minus 200 earlier in the week. That may have dropped down 10 points. And then this Zaleski and Muslim fight, minus 110 each. I think Zaleski's favored. I usually use DraftKings because I'm in Jersey. I think Zaleski's favored on DraftKings. I think he was minus 115. But either way, I mean, this is more or less a pick-em fight. Zaleski, the capoeira kind of fighter. He has submitted people, right? Curtis Millender, that was a pretty close fight, brought him down and submitted him. I think Zaleski has the advantage in, on the ground in BJJ. Usman, but talk about these two guys, like, with the spinning kicks. I know I saw some people saying it on Twitter. Like, there's going to be nonstop spinning kicks in this fight like you've never seen before. It's going to be crazy. But this could very well steal. If any of these undercard fights steals fight of the night, it could be this one, because it could go back and forth. You don't really know. This could be a live betting opportunity where if you're on Zaleski early and Muslim wins the first round or looks good early, you may want to live bet the other way, try to get some underdog odds, because this could very well finish in round 2 regardless of what's happening. So I think it's a great fight to watch. I haven't bet it. I'm probably not going to bet it for DraftKings, and I'm going to do a DraftKings show next week. AJ, if you're interested, maybe you could jump on that too. I was going to do a DraftKings show. I think this is a GPP fight. I think this is going to finish. It may not finish in round 1, but I think by round 2, guys get a little tired, start dropping their hands a little bit. Their defenses are down. Like, their striking is so unique. They'll try anything in the cage, and they both have a lot of power. So, good lower leg kicks. They attack the legs. Just well-rounded fighters. AJ, I'll throw it to you. I'm not going to pick a winner here. If I had to pick a winner, I'd probably pick Zaleski only because I like him. You know what I mean? I like watching him fight. I haven't seen Muslim fight much. But, I mean, this fight is legit, man. This is a good fight.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. This fight's awesome. It has all the makings of just a high-action affair. Muslim is, like, just not only is he just a guy that has an incredible striking pedigree, it shows in his MMA fights. He's got big power in his hands. We saw him knock out a durable Nordin Taleb. He also knocked out Ricky Rainey. The guy is just so sharp and so fast, and I do think he'll be faster than Santos here. And, his striking is just pretty much as good as you could get, like, from a technical level. But the thing that makes me nervous for him and why he could potentially even lose the striking exchanges to Santos is just by being not as busy as Santos is. Salikhov, yeah, he's good, he's technical, he hits hard, but the thing that I notice with him is his striking output is low. He rarely throws in combination. When he does throw it, it's powerful and technical, but I would like to see a bit more frequency out of him. So perhaps Santos just kind of outworks him on the feet, because, like, we see Santos, yeah, he's not as technical as Salikhov, but I think his kicks are like technical enough to be competitive in those kicking exchanges. But I do think Salikhov's got the better hands. And the thing that makes me nervous, though, about Salikhov in general is the cardio. He definitely slowed down there against Starapoli. Starapoli was landing on him there in that third round. He started to get noticeably tired there towards the end of round 2. And that's part of the reason why we're seeing him land not that many strikes. And, when he wins by knockout, that's great.
Uh-oh.
But when
we lose AJ?
Can you hear me? Hello?
All right. Hopefully we get AJ back. I'll pick this up. AJ, we got you back?
Yeah. You hear me?
Yeah, you froze and then you came back. So you were only there we lost you for about 10, maybe 15 seconds.
Okay. I apologize. So let me go back to that. So
you were at Staropoli, third round. He started getting tired.
Okay. So started getting tired there. And that's kind of what makes me nervous about him in general is like, yeah, he could go out there and he's good and technical and powerful when he's fresh, but like how long is he going to be fresh for? And we've seen Santos, he's been finished before, yes, but the guy's got a really good chin on him. We saw him take some hard shots from Griffin, got hurt, but recovered very quickly. And it was like, the Jing Liang fight, yeah, it happened. He got finished, but it wasn't like he was put out cold. So I still tend to think that he's pretty durable. And the thing that makes me most nervous about Salikhov is while I don't think Santos is as good of a wrestler to take him down because Salikhov, his defensive wrestling is solid, and Santos hasn't shown to be the most efficient offensive wrestler. In fact, his takedown accuracy is about 20%. And just looking at it on tape, like he doesn't go for takedowns often. And when he does, again, technique is not ideal. But, man, if he gets in top position on Salikhov, like he takes his back in the clinch or there's just like some scrambling opportunity where he just hops on his back, I think he could submit him. I mean, Salikhov, that's how he's lost both of his professional fights. And we've seen Santos is a black belt. So he definitely has that to fall back on. So I'm with you. Like, I think Santos has a bit more ways to win the fight, not by like a pronounced margin, but, man, I would not be surprised to see Salikhov just show that technique, that power, that high-level pedigree, and very good defense to win rounds here and potentially hurt Santos. But not to, get away from the fact that what we just mentioned right away was this fight will be awesome. No doubt about it.
100%. It's going to be great. I know, just so everybody knows, AJ is not going to tip his hand on bets. He does sell his bets, but I try every time he gives a hot take, I try to throw the hot take in there. So you haven't noticed it just yet, but with that possible call for the submission, I had to throw the hot take in there.
All good, man. Yeah, I do think it could happen, and not like something that I think is like that out there. Santos has only won by sub 3 times, but man, when we're looking at a black belt versus a blue belt on the ground, it could happen.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I'm gonna take this one and introduce this fight and give my insight only because I bet this, and this was my first bet on this card, and this is Volkan. So this is Volkan Ozdemir versus I may screw up this name, Yuri Prochaska. All right, so I'm gonna call him Yuri because that's the name that I can pronounce. I really like Volkan here. I think that Volkan is going to be able this plays right into the things that I think Volkan can do well. I think he can use his low kicks. I think they're going to be very effective here. I think he has a clinch advantage. I think he has a strength advantage. Yuri is going to be taller. I think he's going to be taller by 2 inches. I didn't see his reach advantage. I know Volkan is a 75-inch reach. So AJ, feel free to just let me know what Yuri's reach is if you have it later on. But I think Volkan's going to want to, take him down, maybe push him up, clinch him, maybe try to take him down and ground and pound him. Don't let him strike early in the fight from distance. The one thing about Yuri is that he is going to have something of a reach advantage. I'm not really sure what it is, but he's very good at his range. I don't think that he's very good at hand-to-hand combat when somebody's right up in your chin. Just because of his long limbs, it kind of prevents him from using his length. So he's got like a shorter torso, long legs, long arms, and I think that he's a good distance striker. If you look at some of his fights, he has fought some decent competition. He fought King Mo. King Mo beat him the first time. I believe it was a 3rd round knockout, and then he wound up beating King Mo the second time, 3rd round knockout. It was King Mo kind of tired out, and I'm not gonna say he gave up, but he just, I guess he kind of saw no path to victory at that point. But I think going into round 3, I think it was 1-1. On my scorecard, it was 1-1. So he has a long stance. His left foot is really forward when he strikes. So I think that Volkan from distance can attack that lead leg and maybe even try to pick for a single leg. But I just think that if Volkan allows him to use his long strikes and allows him to dictate the distance, Volkan could lose this fight. I think that what he needs to do is really crowd him, push him up against the cage, tire him out, maybe send him for a takedown. I'm going to assume this guy's going to play it a little bit, even against King Mo. He played it a little slow, so I think he's going to wind up giving away round 1 if he does that, and Volkan pushes him against the cage. I don't think he'll have an answer for it. And then Volkan come out in round 2 and maybe change it up again. Maybe he wants to strike. Maybe he wants to attack the legs. If he has success and is able to clinch up and get him down to the ground, then by all means do that again. I just think that Volkan, if he's coached well, he's not going to strike with him at range. You do that, you're letting Yuri stay in the fight. So AJ, what do you think here? And that's the basis for my bet. And I got it at minus 162 on DraftKings.
Like our guy Zhalgas, Yuri's reach advantage remains a mystery, according to ESPN.com. But
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I do think he could have a reach advantage here. But why I'm hopeful to add your argument for Volkan is we've seen Volkan in the past go up against better technical strikers, in my opinion, in longer fighters. When we saw him face Dominic Reyes and Alexander Rakic, we saw how he fared there. Split decision or not, he arguably beats the number 1 contender in Dominic Reyes. I scored that fight for him. Again, it was just a close fight where could have gone either way. The fact that he was competitive there with Reyes told me that, again, he is amongst the elite of the heavyweights there. And then he has a very good win over Alexander Rakic, has beat other good fighters as well, such as OSP, Misha Serkinov, others. So to your point, like from a competition perspective, like Volkan has got this by a mile. Like you said, he has fought fighters such as King Mo, CB Dalloway, guys that have competed in the UFC and have had their solid run. But in terms of purely level of opposition, Volkan has just been fighting the best of the best pretty much ever since he's been in the UFC. Yuri, he's still kind of a question mark. He's looked good in some of his Ryzen fights, but it's not like, he hasn't shown some flaws. He keeps his hands down. I do think to your point that while this fight is at range, that's where he will be at his best. He has some good movement and footwork, but I'm hopeful that Volkan could kind of just neutralize that by utilizing leg kicks like he did against Rakic, pressuring him, perhaps landing a takedown or two. Like you said with Volkan, he's not a great wrestler, but he has a wrestling capability. He can look to take fights to the ground. His grappling, I do believe, is improving. And Yuri, his grappling has looked a bit shaky at times. So I think Volkan could have his way with him on the ground or even on the feet. I think Volkan can win by knockout. I do think he's the better technical striker. And so we'll see exactly how Yuri looks inside the octagon, but I tend to think that he just needs to keep space from Volkan to have the most success. But even that, like the guy, he's long and powerful, but we know Volkan is so durable. I don't think I've ever seen him get hurt in the UFC. Cormier finished him on the ground, but that's the thing. It was from a mounted crucifix position. Like it wasn't like Cormier.
Yeah, that was from strikes, volume strikes rather than knocking somebody out. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't think a Yuri knockout is that likely, and he hasn't shown he's got some cool knee finishes. Like he's a good athlete, but we see that stuff that generally does not work when you work your way up the ranks, and especially a guy like Usman, he's going to see that type of stuff coming, and they know that on tape. So yeah, better volume, more technical, better experienced. I think this is really Volkan's fight to lose. I'm right there with you. I think Yuri's got some potential, but this is a tall task in his UFC debut. I would have thought that if they wanted to build him up, they would have given him somebody that's a bit more winnable of a matchup. But yeah, I'm with you. Volkan should win the fight. I think he could win by knockout as well. I noticed Yuri has been finished before. Again, the striking defense does concern me of Yuri. The hands are kept low. He kind of just relies on his movement and athleticism. But a guy in Volkan who has, again, been in there with Rakic and Reyes, had his fair share of success in those fights, I think it's going to get his hand raised here, whether it's by decision or knockout.
And AJ, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but did he beat Reyes?
I think he did. I mean, okay, I know the judges didn't see that way, but yeah. How about you? Do you think he got it?
I think that Volkan beat Reyes, and I also think Reyes beat John Jones.
Yeah, I could see that argument too. That's actually one of those. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say that's just the way I see it. Again, I'm not trying to cause any problems here or make anyone think I'm crazy here. I watch fights. That's what I do. I watch every fight that I can, and that's how I was shocked. And don't get me wrong, I cashed. I didn't bet John Jones. That was minus whatever. I didn't necessarily like that, but I bet Reyes against Volkan, and I was shocked that I cashed that because I was convinced I lost that in a parlay. Okay, what do you think there?
Yeah, no, I didn't actually go back and rewatch that. I thought live though. Reyes could have gotten the edge there. Very competitive fight. The fact that he was that competitive with John, though, either way, shows how good of a fighter he really is.
Yeah, and again, he was a football player basically, right? He college football player, and he thought he was going to go pro. Didn't he have like a knee injury or something like that?
I don't know his back.
Story.
Yeah, I know he's got a football background. I don't know beyond that, but yeah, good fighter.
Yeah,
Could get even better too.
We're in agreement. We're in agreement with Volkan, and again, I don't know if I showed the odds up there, but let's just make reference to the odds here. He's minus 155. I mean, I think that's a steal. I think that's something that everybody needs to jump on now. I wouldn't be surprised if a big bet came in on Volkan and pushed that to minus 200, minus 220 over the next 10 days. I mean, that's how confident I am in Volkan. I have 3 bets on Volkan. I have a bet with Volkan straight. I have him and Petr Yan. And then I also have him and who's the other one? Who's the other parlay I have with him? I want to be accurate with this. I don't want to BS. Amanda Ribas. So I have him with Amanda Ribas when she was like minus 500. That's not something that you really want to parlay at this point, minus 900. But I put him. I just wanted to get more money on Volkan because I just think that that line is just off. But AJ, we actually, I just realized we skipped that fight. Can we skip Ribas and Page? Do you have anything to say about that fight?
I don't think we skipped it. I think we're just in line because that's the.
Oh, are we?
Yeah, we're right on track. Yeah.
So go ahead. Paige and Amanda Ribas. I'm picking Ribas. I would parlay her up to 500 since I already did. Now that it's minus 900, I think it's putting everybody off. It's just not worth throwing in parlays, and I think that's why it's minus 900. I think they don't want you to take this fight. So what do you think, AJ?
Yeah, I mean, it should really be Ribas here all day. It's reflected in the odds. I mean, you could always make the case that, somebody's maybe too big of a favorite or whatever the case may be. The number's too big, whatever. The analysis, though, leads me to believe that Ribas should be a big favorite here, regardless if it's 900, 800. The reality is she should just be a big favorite here. And it's because I think she's just the better fighter everywhere. From the stylistic perspective, I think she's a better striker, better defense, better footwork. I think we'll have a speed advantage as well. Fights at the higher pace, more technical. And the big compelling advantage there for Ribas, though, is I think going to be on the ground. She is a BJJ black belt. She has a judo background as well. Not an elite takedown artist, but I tend to think that her wrestling is good enough to get Paige down, who has been taken down multiple times in the past, has given up a lot of position. One of the interesting stats I came across when researching this fight was Paige has allowed 28 advances in her UFC career. Just, going back to her fight against Rachel Ostovich, she was mounted there. She was taken down a few times. She was taken down by Jessica Rose Clark. She was put in some submission attempts, had her back taken. So those women couldn't finish her, but a woman in Ribas who is a black belt, who has shown that she could finish fights at a professional mixed martial arts level. And Paige has been finished by submission a couple times, including her loss to Rose. I think that Ribas can win by submission here. I think it's possible. And she should just really have all the advantages here. Cardio as well. One thing that really impressed me about Ribas in that last fight, that's a good win over Randa Marcos, was she did that at Brasilia, Brazil, which is a location that is high altitude. I mean, she pushed a heck of a pace, was going on strong there late in the fight, and won every round clearly. And so that just tells me that she's got a lot of upside. Still young. I don't know that from what I could gather on Instagram, she isn't doing this camp as full throttle as she was in the past at American Top Team, but she has trained there in the past. I think she's hungry. I do think that Paige is motivated here. I mean, she's got some motivation in that this is the last fight on her contract, and this is like a good sell. Like she could, market herself like in a way if she has a good showing here if she wants to join Bellator or stay with the UFC. Like this is an opportunity here. That said, I still do think Ribas has her head in it more than Paige because Paige has some stuff, on the side. It's well documented. Whereas Ribas, I just think is like laser focused on UFC gold, and wanted this fight. She called her out after she beat Marco. So I just really like Ribas here. Again, I know that people could always debate numbers in terms of odds, but however which way I slice it, I mean, Ribas should just be a big favorite here. Whether it's 600, 900, 700, she should just be a big favorite here. And it's because she's the better fighter at all the various facets of this. So it should be Ribas here. And I'm going to pick her to win by submission here.
So we're going to get into the better part of, I guess, the main card at this point. Because that technically is the opener, right? That's the opener for the main card.
It is.
Yeah, so kind of shocking. But with that being said, Jessica Andrade and Rose Namajunas. Why don't I do this one and I'll do the Volk fight, and then I'll throw you the Jan fight and the Usman fight to introduce those. So we'll take 2 each. I think Andrade and Rose. I was on Rose the first time they fought, and she fought a more or less a flawless round 1 for the most part. Kept great distance. Her striking was on point. And she excelled. I think once it got into the grappling exchanges is where Rose got herself into a little bit of trouble, not because she's not capable, just because Andrade has a strength advantage. And I think that's where Andrade should go again and go earlier in this fight. I think she's got to not allow Rose to get comfortable at her distances, at her striking best. And again, if you go through Rose's wins and losses, the 2 Joanna fights that she won, obviously those were striking fights. You know what I mean? Michelle Waterson, not the best fighter in the world. She made a little bit of a run, but she got her on the ground, and her BJJ is good enough. She submitted her. Losing to Carolina at this point is a pretty bad loss, especially after what Jessica did to Carolina. Losing to Carla Esparza again is not a very good loss when you consider Esparza, took advantage of the wrestling. So you're talking about Paige Van Zandt, who obviously we don't have a very high opinion on. She lost to Tisha Torres, won in the rematch. I mean, she hasn't beat any great grapplers or anyone that can really hold her own grappling. So in my opinion, and even Carolina is big for this weight class. So in terms of what can Jessica do, I think she needs to use her strength to her advantage. She needs to get into the clinch earlier in this fight. Don't let Rose win round 1 and get comfortable. Because again, you just said documented issues that Paige has. Rose had documented issues too. If you put her behind the 8 ball and make her lose round 1, that could get into her head also. So I think that Andrade has to use that to her advantage. And I'm not saying that she can't strike with Rose and hurt her on the feet. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is tire her out, clinch her, make her uncomfortable, then use your striking. Because that first fight, round 1, I think we're in agreement. Rose won round 1. Round 2, it came out, and it got into a little bit of the clinch. It got to the ground. Rose had her in the armbar attempt, and then got slammed on her head. You know what I mean? So it all happened real quick, but it happened when they weren't striking. And again, if they're going to strike from distance, it's the same kind of thing I said before with Yuri. What worries me with Yuri? He's a capable striker, and he's long. I don't know what his length is, but he's long. If you allow him to strike at distance, he can have an advantage. He can win rounds. Rose can do the same thing, and she's done it with the best. She's done it with Joanna. So if you can win rounds against Joanna, you can win rounds against anybody. So let's get her out of her comfort zone. If we're Jessica Andrade, I haven't put a bet on this yet, but that plus 165 is real juicy to me. AJ, what do you think here?
Yeah, I tend to agree, and I did bet Rose that first time. I did, and it's you could look at it 2 different ways. Yes, I still do think Rose will have that overall technical advantage. She's a more technical striker. She will fight better when she keeps her range a ways away. Where I'm going with this is you could look at, Andrade picked her up and slammed her, and that's how she won the fight. She was losing the majority of it prior to then. Or you could say, well, Andrade just really needs one opportunity to close distance. She could hurt her with a big punch, or, again, she could just land several significant strikes with her barrage of strikes that she throws, or just take Rose down. And so I just think it's another fight, just like our main event last week. It's going to be based on ranges. Those ranges at a distance are going to favor Rose, like you compared her with Yuri. And the ones that close up are going to favor Andrade. But while I'm hopeful that Andrade can perhaps close distance even earlier here, is she knew in that first fight, like she had to change things up a bit. She went after Rose more aggressively, got Rose to slow down there. I mean, Rose was noticeably tired there towards the end of round 1. It's because Andrade's pace is just hard to match. I mean, and Rose is a woman who trains at Denver, Colorado. Like, her cardio is definitely solid. It's just Andrade is a woman who we've seen go out there, land 10 takedowns over the course of a 3-round fight. Her cardio is essentially unmatched. And so, she's just going to, I think, be pressuring Rose. I think she could utilize leg kicks again to slow Rose down, mitigate that movement. And I listened to you and Drew talking about this fight a couple days ago, and I thought you guys made some good points. Basically Rose needs to fight a perfect fight. She needs to keep Andrade away from her enough times to either hurt her with a big punch and finish, or do it enough to win rounds. And that's just easier said than done, because as the fight progresses I'm not going to even say round to round basis. I think minute to minute basis, it's going to be more and more favor of Andrade, because she's going to be collecting that intel, pressuring her more, closing that distance more frequently, and again, landing those takedowns. I think she's the better wrestler. I think she's the better submission grappler too, BJJ black belt. I know Rose was threatening her with that Kimura attempt, but I would be shocked to see Rose just submit her. I mean, Andrade is a woman who competes in BJJ competition, again, a black belt. So it just seems like a reach that Rose submits her, despite the fact that Rose is a good grappler herself. So, yeah, I see what you're saying here. And on top of that, we've got some intangibles on Rose where it makes me nervous for her, to be honest. She contemplated not fighting again after she lost to Andrade. And, this is her first fight since the first time the two women fought. And then we couple that with the fact that Andrade already has a win over her. So it's interesting circumstances for Rose. Again, I'm not going to put it past her to win. She's still a very talented fighter. But stylistically, I do think, to your point, that Andrade is probably a tougher stylistic matchup for her than, say, Joanna was, because Joanna brings that sort of same range striking threat, and Rose was just simply faster than her, more powerful, and while she was relatively fresh, just more evasive and more effective than her. So it's an interesting matchup, and one that I would not be surprised to see Andrade win again. Maybe not in the same way she won the first time, but maybe just in a way that we just see her have a lot more success close up, close that distance more frequently, and just kind of win rounds if not get a stoppage. And I know you said for me to introduce the next one. So, yeah, I mean, Jan and Aldo, I mean, this is just an awesome fight. This one, I'll save the bulk of the analysis for you, because I kind of have a little bit of reservations here about going, all in on the Jan train, so to speak. And I'm somebody that likes Jan. I think he's very talented. Not to say that he hasn't proven himself in the UFC. I think he has, but I do think that Aldo has the much better resume. And, I go back and I look at Jan's footage against Jimmy Rivera. He was outstruck there. If he doesn't knock down Rivera there at the end of rounds 1 and 2, does he get the nod? I mean, I don't know. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But the fact that Rivera was able to make it as competitive as he did kind of makes me a bit nervous for Jan. And the reason why he did make it more competitive there, because Jan, while I do think he's a good technical striker offensively, he's got the good Muay Thai stance, he's got the high guard, he's tough, he's durable. The defense makes me a little bit nervous about him. His movement could definitely be improved, both in terms of utilizing proper head movement and just overall slipping the punches, moving the body. Aldo, I think, is a superior defensively sound, I should say the more defensively sound fighter. The thing that makes me nervous about Aldo, though, and again, I know that he looked good against Moraes, and I think that's encouraging. Those weight cuts where he's at his stage of his career, again, a guy who's 6 years older than Jan, has definitely taken more damage than Jan, which is why I think it's fair to predict Jan wins this fight by finish. And that's why we're seeing the odds suggest that that's the most likely outcome. Those weight cuts for Aldo, as he does it more and more, because we know 145 was never an easy cut for him, and now he's dropping an extra 10. And on top of that, just like that fight with Moraes in comparison, he had to go down to 136. He did, and we were all happy that he looked good there and went out and got a good performance. But now he's got to shed an extra pound, which could be, I hope it's not the case, but it could be worse for him. It could hinder his cardio. It could hinder his durability. So while I'm hopeful that Aldo looks good here again, I'm not so sold that he just goes out here and looks exactly how he did against Moraes. If he does, then yeah, he can make it a fight. He could beat Jan. But I got to favor Jan in terms of youth, durability. And Jan's got that similar pressure style that Holloway has, even though he's not as excessive of a volume striker as Holloway. He can pressure, he can walk you down, and he can threaten you with power. So I'm actually really intrigued with this fight. And one that I don't think is necessarily clear cut. I think Jan is the rightful favorite here. But one that I think could be kind of sneaky in terms of how the way the fight could play out. Because I can understand people picking Jan, and I think that's the right side, but I'm not necessarily counting out Aldo, so I'll just kick it over to you. Why do you like Jan here? Why do you think he's going to roll?
I think I like Jan. Again, I think you mentioned Drew when Drew and I talked about this, and Drew is, really on Jan. So maybe it came off as I was really on Jan too. I'm on Jan, but I'm not head over heels on Jan like Drew is. I think there are some things that, are concerning, and the volume is one of them. But again, and I always say this when I watch fights, and that's why sometimes fights don't make sense to me, because I don't think the judges are scoring it the way that I score it. And again, it's not, the numbers don't always tell the picture, right? I mentioned that earlier, because it's supposed to be scored in a way that whoever does the most damage is winning rounds. So if you hit somebody 10 times with, jabs and it's not really doing any damage, but someone comes with, 2 overhand rights and then winds up maybe even dropping you or bloodying you up, there's more damage there if you're wearing that damage. It's supposed to be a damage scorecard in MMA. So to that end, and again, if I'm wrong, correct me, but to that end, I just see that Jan is going to do more damage. And case in point, go back to round 3. A lot of people thought Moraes and Aldo, round 3, a lot of people gave that fight to Aldo, right? But who did more damage? It was Moraes with the bigger shots in round 3 that probably won him that round. And that's the way, in my opinion, that MMA is supposed to be scored. I don't even know what the numbers were. Maybe they were close. Maybe Aldo outstruck him in terms of the numbers, the sheer numbers. But in terms of the more damaging strikes, I gave it to Moraes because he probably had the 2 or 3 most damaging strikes in round 3. So that's just the way that I score round by round as I'm watching fights. And again, I know you do the same thing. We watch all these fights. You know what I mean? So when you watch the fights and people are throwing up fights on Twitter and scorecards, I'm basing it mostly on damage. And sometimes I'm surprised when people score one way or the other based on, like, there was no damage there. And, to reference a fight earlier, when we were talking about, off the top of my head, of course, Rosa. If you go back and you watch the Rosa fight, she was bleeding in round 1. Like, you can see she's wearing the damage. So obviously she got popped with some good stuff that, made her nose bleed or whatever it was. Even talk about Paiva, right? Pavia's last fight, 2 fights ago, was stopped because of the damage. You could argue that he was winning at that part of the fight, caught a knee, opened up a gash, was bleeding, and the doctor stopped the fight. You know what I'm saying? So in terms of damage, that's the way that I score fights. That's what I really look at. I don't think everybody does that, though. I really don't. But I think when you look at it through that lens, I think Jan is going to wind up having the bigger strikes, and to me that's more damaging in those circumstances. So that's why I'm on Jan. Maybe I went on a little bit of a rant there, but that's why I'm on Jan, because I just think that he's going to wind up stalking. He's definitely going to be stalking, right? He's going to move forward. He stalks differently than Holloway. Holloway stalks, moves forward, and strikes. Jan stalks and then picks his shots. But it's like you're on edge because you don't know when he's going to strike. So we all know Jimmy Rivera doesn't knock people out, right? Jimmy Rivera is a decision fighter. But why can Jan win rounds against Jimmy Rivera? Because even though Jimmy Rivera may outstrike him, which is what you just mentioned, Jan has the big strike. He has that home run hitter. He's a home run hitter. That's what he is. You know what I mean? So that's where I take it. And again, even in his last fight, he had a couple takedowns. He was able to take Uriah down and threaten and then knock him out. But all those bigger strikes usually wear on you. The volume definitely wore on Aldo in both of those strikes, in both of those fights against Holloway. I think the volume could wear on Jan in this Jan fight here, because Jan is going to come with volume to a certain extent, but it's going to be heavier strikes. And that kind of brings me into this next fight. So just to throw up the odds here, just so that we're on the same page. If I'm just picking winners, my winners are Andrade. My winners are Petr Jan, and then my winner is Volkanovski. And I bet Volkanovski in a parlay with Volkan Ozdemir. And I'm a big Max Holloway fan. All right, anybody that knows me knows I'm a big Max. I made a ton of money on Max Holloway in that Brian Ortega fight. I had Max everywhere. I had Ortega in my cash lineup and in GPP lineups. I bet Max. I had big bets everywhere. I had Max to finish the fight. I made a ton of money. I mean, I'm talking close to $2,000 in total on that Max Ortega fight. I love Max. But the problem with Max is he doesn't have the power that Jan has. You know what I mean? So he has to get you with volume. And he couldn't get Volkanovski with volume. So I put out my breakdown. One of the podcasts I listen to every week is Anakin Florian podcast. All right. I'm always texting back and forth with Ian Parker, always texting back and forth with Yanni. You know, and one of the things that Parker and I talked about was how does Max Holloway change this? How does he change this fight? He's not taking Volkanovski down. He doesn't do that. I had mentioned in the podcast with Drew that Volkanovski didn't even look for takedowns. And you know what? Ian told me Max has great takedown. And I think Kenny Florian said it on the Anakin Florian podcast also. Yes, Max has great takedown, right? Ortega couldn't get him down. But with all that said, if Volkanovski can take Max's punches and come back at him and hurt him, and you can see the damage, just like Poirier did to Max, you could see the damage on Max. You could see that Poirier's punches were damaging Max more than the other way around, even though there was volume. You can say the same thing about Dan Hooker and Poirier. Poirier took the punches, all right? The strike volume was very close in a lot of those early rounds, but Poirier took the punches and had more damaging punches. So by the time it got to round 3, where we all were like, oh, wow, Poirier's down 2 rounds. Is he going to be able to come back? Like, he just kept powered through, and I'm pretty sure that most people gave definitely round 2 to Hooker. Maybe some people probably gave round 1 to Hooker. But Poirier was able to just power through the volume because he had the strength, and I think that's what Volkanovski has. He can power through with his strength and hurt Holloway with those strikes. So to that end, again, what is he going to do differently? He can't do what he did against Ortega because Ortega couldn't hurt him the same way Volkanovski can. Volkanovski can hurt him. He's going to wear that damage. So I think I hit Volkanovski minus 200 in my parlay. May have been minus 200 or minus 210. Right now on fightodds.io, which again is the fight odds that I use on the website, Volkanovski's minus 190. I like that. I like that straight. I like that in a parlay. I like Volkanovski. Some people thought that the first fight was closer than it was. I kind of didn't. I think that if you go back and you watch that fight and you look at damage, I think Volkanovski did more damage in most of those rounds. So AJ, I'll throw it to you, and then you can go right into the Usman breakdown.
Yeah, I think you made some good points. Yeah, it's honestly just a tougher matchup for Max because he's facing a guy who can match his volume, exceed his volume, and threaten with more power, just like we saw in the Poirier matchup. And again, just have that good cardio for all 5 rounds. And like you said, Volkanovski's wrestled in the past. He's a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but he didn't even need to fall back on that. I mean, he didn't even need to clinch with Max. I mean, he tried to a couple times like he did. It worked very effectively against Aldo, but Max is to his credit, is a very good defensive clinch fighter. When Volkanovski did want to clinch with Max pretty much got right out of there. So that's nice for him in general. And I would just say in terms of adjustments, and not necessarily that I'm expecting Max to do it, but first things first, he has to check those kicks because when these two gentlemen were in kicking range, it was like all Volkanovski. Like, I mean, Max, like you said, he just primarily wants to box. He's a good technical boxer. He's got some volume, all that. That's great. But when these two gentlemen are kicking range and Volkanovski is just the guy that's throwing, I mean, Max throws kicks some, but he's not nearly as busy as Volkanovski is. Those are just going to favor Volkanovski just based on volume. And, we know Max is so tough and durable. I mean, he's not going to finish Max with low kicks or anything like that, but just another tool to slow Max down and just be more effective at those exchanges. And the boxing exchanges should favor Volkanovski too, while he's relatively fresh. More power. I think he's got the better countering ability, better footwork as well, utilize his feints. And again, that volume that he has, throws the combinations really good. Max is certainly going to be competitive, but it should be clearly Volkanovski until, like you said, Max is the fresher guy, whether it's round 4, whether it's round 5. Maybe it doesn't happen in this fight. I think there's reason to be optimistic here that Volkanovski's cardio looks better here than, say, it did in December, just because, to his credit, that was his first 5-round fight in the UFC. It's honestly pretty crazy to see, him not even get like a fight night headliner or something like that. I know he fought the majority of the time. He was an Australian guy. I don't know the travel restrictions or anything like that, but it's pretty crazy to see him go 5 rounds, and your first 5-round fight is arguably the best conditioned guy in the UFC, one of them at least, him, or whether it's him or Tony or one of these other guys, do that and be competitive and exceed the volume of Max on a round-to-round basis. So it basically just comes down to, when is Volkanovski going to get tired? And if so, it needs to be in a point in time where Max could do the majority of his work on a volume basis, because like you said, Max not a power guy, not expecting to knock out Volkanovski. When does that point in time come? I'm not exactly banking on that, because, again, it took him about 3 rounds for him to really pick up and exceed Volkanovski's volume. I think the most viable thing for Max to do, and again, I'm not expecting this just because we haven't seen Max really do it, is check those kicks. Max, that's kind of just been his kryptonite. People were talking about it leading into the Jose Aldo fights, they just never really came to fruition, because I believe Aldo was hurt the first time, and then Aldo's just kind of gotten away from throwing them in general to a certain extent. But anyway, that will need to be what Max does, because, again, if he does that, as simple as it may seem, he's taking away that threat while they're at kicking range, and he'll be a lot more competitive just off that alone. But to your point, I mean, I'm not necessarily expecting him to do it because we haven't seen him do it, and for that reason, I have to favor Volkanovski. Again, the more success at kicking range, I think we'll have more success at boxing range, and it's kind of just, I think his cardio will be good enough to win rounds here, and probably win by decision, because we've seen Max is just very hard to hurt and has never been finished via strike. So I think we're on the right track there with that fight. And then the main event, yeah, good one. 2 former training partners. We've got Kamaru Usman, -245 per ESPN stats, or excuse me, per ESPN.com, taking on former training partner Gilbert Burns at +205. I gotta say, Usman, of all the camps that he wanted to switch to when he made the decision to move, so he wasn't training with Burns, I think, Team Elevation, that is a camp, in my personal opinion, is on fire in 2020. I think they're probably the best camp. You got Curtis Blades is there, Alistair Overeem, Corey Sandhagen, Austin Hubbard, Rose is there. You've just got so many high-level fighters there, and I just named a few. But, I'm seeing Usman on Instagram. He's doing training sessions, sparring sessions with Gaethje. I know Gaethje's a lightweight, but, I mean, man, you want to talk about a very good sparring partner. That's awesome. So, yeah, I'll say this right away. I was wrong. I predicted Woodley to beat Burns. I didn't bet him or anything like that. Again, the layoff and other factors maybe not bet him. I was happy to see Burns be more filled out as a welterweight. He looked very physical in that fight, more physical than I expected him to. He looked more physical than Woodley, and Woodley's, again, a physical guy for this weight class. That said, I still think Usman is more physical than him. Usman's just a big, strong guy, just kind of in general. And Usman's also never been taken down. Very strong clinch fighter as well. So I just tend to think that it's going to be won or lost in the feet, because I don't see why Usman, kind of like what we talked about with Bogatov against Santos, why he would want to take this fight to the ground against a guy who's a second-degree BJJ black belt. Even though Usman is a black belt, I just don't see why he would do it, knowing that he's probably got the striking advantage, at least on paper. 5-inch reach advantage. I think he's got the better straight punches. I think he's more technical. Burns does have some power, yes, but I just think he needs to knock Usman out to win. I mean, I just think on a volume basis, on a technical basis, I think Usman has him beat. I mean, Usman's striking defense does make me nervous to some extent. He could definitely do a better job of moving his head. That's part of the reason why Covington was hurting him so many times. I just think it kind of comes down to, does Burns hurt him? Possibly yes. Again, Burns does hit hard. We've seen him hurt durable fighters such as Damian Maia in the past. Usman, though, I just think he's durable and good enough to probably win this fight on the feet. Again, it makes me nervous because, again, we're relying on him to not use what he's best at. Yeah, Usman's a good striker, yes, but, I mean, again, he's his bread and butter is his wrestling, his clinch work, his grappling, all that. And so we're kind of relying on him to win the way he beat Covington, and that's fine. But again, we're kind of taking away some tools from Usman that have been proven to be reliable. So Burns will probably try to look to get the fight to the ground. I just don't think he'll be that successful. Again, Usman never been taken down. I think the better wrestler. Physicality, I think, is in his favor as well. So that's basically the way the fight breaks down. I think it should be fun. I think it should be high action. Again, it's always a curious point. Like, what were these sparring sessions like between these two guys? I'm sure they were just wild and entertaining. But, I got Usman here. I think he's the rightful favorite, but should be a fun fight. I wouldn't put it past Burns. He's certainly game. He's certainly riding on momentum, and he's certainly been a lot more active than Usman. So what do you think here? You think Burns has a chance, or?
I do think Burns has he has a legit chance. Let me go back to a couple things on the last fight, because you went right into it, so I didn't want to throw you off your game. But if you go back to Aldo and Holloway real quick, and then we'll get back to this Burns fight. Aldo and Holloway. Aldo was able to win round one. Let's talk about the first fight. Aldo was able to win round one, probably win round two. I think Holloway came to life towards the end of round two. But with that being said, who died out first, right? It was Aldo. Aldo lost his gas. Holloway then beat him with volume. So it goes to your point about the first fight with Volkanovski and Holloway. Holloway couldn't get to Volkanovski's gas tank. He couldn't empty it. And again, when we're talking about this fight here, who just fought? Dan Hooker. I mean, Volkanovski had to be doing that entire training camp with Dan Hooker. Just like Usman is in the gym with Justin Gaethje, you would have to think Dan Hooker and Volkanovski are in the gym just about every single day. And with that being said, if they're in the gym, who knows if Israel's there pumping them up and all these other guys that do train together at certain points. I think Volkanovski is going to be at the top of his game. And again, I think he also knows, and you're absolutely right. I don't think he necessarily knew that that's what was going to happen back in December, whenever that fight was. But I think he knows now he cannot lose this fight. If Holloway is going to win this belt from him, it cannot be because he gasses out. So I'm going to say that Volkanovski is working his ass off with his cardio. Now, to get to this fight with Burns and Usman, we're almost on an hour and a half, so this is a long podcast. But I think it's very, very important to realize how good Burns is on the ground. So how does he – I'm not saying he has to get Usman to the ground, but if he can lock his hands against the cage and clinch and maybe, gain an advantage because Usman is very concerned with him taking his back, maybe even on the feet, that has to be an advantage to Burns also. You know what I mean? So how does he use his BJJ grappling to put Usman at a disadvantage where he can't use his wrestling prowess? You know what I mean? And that's something that Burns and his camp is going to have to figure out. The next part of that is it surprising to you at all that Usman is the one that changed camps and Burns stayed? I don't know. I don't know what the particulars around that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Usman just was kind of voluntary about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't look too much into it. I guess technically one guy didn't really have to leave. So the fact that somebody took the initiative to do it, I think is just kind of like a friendly thing to do, like a respectful manner. But I didn't really think too much I didn't make much of it.
And again, maybe I just thought of it since I did the other podcast with Drew. I was just thinking to myself, why did he leave? And maybe it's nothing. Maybe exactly what you said. He just did the friendly thing. He took it upon itself to do it. I don't know. I find it a little weird that the champ is the one that had to pick a new camp. But that was just me. So, who's the better striker? I think you kind of lean a little Usman. I think I lean a little Burns. I think Burns may be the better striker, a little more dynamic. If go back through Burns' fights, what was the fight that kind of stands out that if this didn't happen, you'd have a higher opinion of Gilbert Burns? So if you go back through his fights, and again, not necessarily playing MMA math or anything here, but if you don't see Dan Hooker knocking him out, do you think anything of his striking? You know what I mean? Because against Prazeres, I wouldn't say it was striking. And he had some losses at 155. Obviously, Hooker did beat him at 155. But if it's not Hooker knocking him out at 155, I think it was wasn't it a straight right that he beat him with? Like a straight right or a straight left, something like that. I mean, he's beaten good guys. You know what I mean? He's done his thing. I mean, he dropped Tyron Woodley in round 1. You know, I mean, it was kind of shocking to see, Tyron on the ground and Burns jumped right on him and then kind of did what Usman did to Woodley for the next 4 rounds. Like he didn't really give him a chance to get back into the fight at all. I always thought, all right, Woodley's back up. He's knocked off the cobwebs. Now he'll be able to win some rounds here. And he never did. Like Burns never let off the gas. So I think this is something that Burns wants. Obviously, it's something that Usman wants. I'm not diminishing anything that Usman has. But yeah, he's not gonna wrestle because he doesn't want to deal with the BJJ and rolling around on the ground and get himself caught in something. He couldn't do that against Covington. And again, against Covington, who we all say is more of a volume guy, right? Like Max, he's not a power guy. It was 2-2 going into round 5. Well, Burns can beat you with some volume and can beat you with some power. Those strikes are going to be a little bit heavier coming from Burns. And you don't want to go to the ground in the same way. So I think, again, I'm not saying Burns is going to win the fight. But to me, I think anyone that's on Burns and wants to throw a bet on it, I think that's where my money's going to end up going at some point. I'm not there yet. I haven't put a bet on this fight yet. But I think that's where my money's going to go in this fight. So, again, if we just go back to the main event fights, just to pick my winners. I just want to be on the record for my winners. Sorry, H, I just threw you off there. I'm going Volkan. I already have a bet on that. I have Andrade. I'm going to go Jan. I'm going to go Volkanovski, and I'm going to go Burns. So I think I got 2 dogs and 2 favorites there. Anything else? Anything else, AJ, to follow up?
No, I think you make some good points. Yeah, I wasn't necessarily holding on. I wasn't holding the Hooker loss against him. I do tend to think that weight cut may have hurt his durability because I tend to think his durability has been better at 170. I do think that Burns' striking has come a long way. I just think that Usman is a bit more technical and throws with more volume. I know that Burns' volume has been upped, and I know that he's got some heavy hands. But yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, it's not a fight where I'm super confident in Usman because at the end of the day, I'm still to back Usman. It's like you got to be relying on his striking. We're relying on Usman, the striker, which obviously is a reliable commodity. But at the same token, if I was to hypothetically put money on a fighter where I got to invest in the secondary skill set, that would make me a little bit nervous. That would make me think twice about it because I'm not getting his full tools. But to your point, if Burns does get him to the ground, that could get interesting. You say he dropped Woodley. He hurt Maya. Maya's very durable. So yeah, I mean, I could see Burns winning. I can. And I think your picks on the main card, I tend to agree with them. So yeah, just an awesome card. I mean,
AJ, don't tip your hand, bro. Don't tip your hand. You're selling picks here, man.
No. Just picking winners. No, but this is just such an awesome card though, because I look at this card and I'm like, Dana has done such just a fantastic job. I mean, going back to UFC 249 when he had all those bookings, and even though some of those bouts fell through, that was initially when Nunes and Spencer were supposed to fight. But the fact that he's just been busting ass and putting these cards together, I mean, it's just tremendous. Like the guy is just it's so admirable to see what he's been doing. To be honest with you, it's so awesome to be a UFC fan right now. I can't stress that enough.
And again, let's just go to the idea when all is said and done, this card is a tough one. It's a pay-per-view. It doesn't start at 2 a.m. The undercard?
I don't think so. I think it's around local time. I think over there, over there, it's like at some. That's where the time is jacked up. Over here, in the States, I think it's around 5 or 6. Central.
All right, if it is, okay. I may have been looking at maybe BT on Sport or something like that. Maybe I was looking at something else, but somewhere it's starting at 2. The undercard's starting at 2, and the main card I guess is starting at 5 or 6. So maybe I hope I'm wrong because I really want to watch this at a normal time. I want to watch every fight.
Yeah, I think we're good. I saw 5 p.m. CST yesterday, so yeah.
Okay. I follow too many European sites, I guess. AJ, I appreciate it again. This was the longest podcast I've ever been on, 1 hour and 33 minutes. My son is home yelling, so I'm going to turn this off right now. And I appreciate you being on, man.
Likewise, Steve. Let's do this again sometime. Thanks for having me. Take care.